The tension in the courtroom was palpable. Prosecutor Pam Bondi, known for her relentless pursuit of justice, stood tall against Judge Dalton, a man whose smug demeanor radiated a sense of untouchable authority. The case at hand was seemingly simple, an illegally waived fine of $10,000 for a high-profile real estate mogul. But for Pam, this was about something far greater: accountability. The tension in the courtroom was unbearable, a thick, almost suffocating presence that hung in the air like an approaching storm. The wood-paneled walls seemed to close in as the weight of what was about to unfold settled upon every spectator. The rows of seats were packed with reporters, legal analysts, and concerned citizens, their eyes darting between the two central figures locked in a battle of principles. Some leaned forward, gripping their notepads tightly, while others whispered in hushed tones, speculating about what was to come. The fluorescent lights above flickered slightly, casting an eerie glow over the proceedings, as if the very room itself sensed the gravity of the moment. The sharp scent of old paper and polished wood mixed with the faint murmur of tension-laced conversations, creating an atmosphere thick with anticipation. At the center of it all stood Pam Bondi, her posture rigid, her expression unyielding. She was a force to be reckoned with, a prosecutor whose name carried a reputation for fearlessly tearing down walls of corruption, no matter how deeply rooted they were. Her sharp navy blue suit was pristine, her blonde hair pulled back into a severe but elegant ponytail, and her piercing eyes locked onto her opponent with an intensity that could break steel. She had faced countless legal battles before, each one a test of her resolve, but today felt different. This was more than just another case. This was a defining moment in her career, a confrontation that could either reaffirm the integrity of the judicial system or expose its darkest failures. Across from her sat Judge Dalton, a man who exuded smug authority, the kind that came with years of unchecked power. His black robe was immaculate, his demeanor calm, yet beneath his veneer of composure there was an undeniable tension in the way his fingers tapped against the bench. He was a man used to being in control, and today that control was slipping through his grasp. The case at hand was simple on the surface: an illegally waived fine of $10,000 for a high-profile real estate mogul. But Pam knew better. This wasn't just about a fine. This was about justice, about accountability, about proving that power could not be used as a shield against the law. The paper trail had been meticulously tracked, the evidence stacked high. Emails, phone records, testimonies from key insiders, all pointed to a disturbing pattern of judicial favoritism. Yet despite the overwhelming proof, Dalton sat there, unfazed, as if he believed himself untouchable. Pam had seen men like him before. People who wielded power as though it were their birthright, believing themselves beyond the reach of the very laws they swore to uphold. She took a measured breath, stepping forward, her heels clicking against the polished floor. The sound echoed through the courtroom like a judge's gavel striking wood. "Your Honor," she began, her voice steady, carrying the kind of unwavering confidence that demanded attention. "With all due respect, this case isn't just about money. It's about the integrity of our judicial system. If one man can evade consequences because of influence, then what precedent does that set?" Her voice carried not just authority, but an underlying urgency, a call to action that resonated with everyone listening. Dalton leaned back, a slow smirk curling at the corner of his lips. The air around him seemed to shift, his arrogance radiating outward. "Ms. Bondi," he said, his voice thick with condescension, "are you implying that I, a sitting judge, would engage in misconduct?" His tone was casual, almost amused, but the flicker of annoyance in his eyes betrayed him. A bead of sweat glistened at his temple, though he quickly wiped it away with a flick of his wrist. His confidence was a facade, and Pam could see the cracks forming beneath the surface. Pam met his gaze without hesitation. "I'm implying that justice should be blind, and yet, here we are." A murmur rippled through the courtroom, Some spectators exchanged knowing glances, while others let out barely audible gasps. Dalton's smirk faded ever so slightly, and his tapping fingers stilled. Pam took advantage of the moment, stepping closer to the bench. She reached into her folder and pulled out a thick stack of documents, each one meticulously organized. She handed them to the court clerk, who, in turn, passed them to Dalton. He barely glanced at them before waving them away dismissively. "Motion denied," he declared, his voice sharp, the gavel in his hand striking the wood with unnecessary force. "There's no merit to your claims." The courtroom erupted in hushed whispers. Pam had expected this. She had anticipated every move he would make, every obstacle he would place in her way. But she had one final move to make. Before anyone could react, the heavy double doors of the courtroom swung open with a resounding thud. A figure in a dark robe strode inside, his presence immediately commanding the room. It was Senior Judge Whittaker. His silver hair and piercing gaze carried an authority that went beyond titles. It was the kind of respect that came from years of unwavering dedication to justice. His sharp eyes scanned the courtroom, landing on Dalton with an expression that was unreadable, yet heavy with meaning. The room fell into a stunned silence. Even Dalton, for the first time that day, looked genuinely uneasy. His hands gripped the arms of his chair a little too tightly, his lips pressing into a thin line. Whittaker approached the bench with slow, deliberate steps. He didn't look at Dalton. Instead, he turned directly to Pam. "Ms. Bondi," he said, his voice carrying the weight of the entire judicial system behind it. "Continue." A flicker of something, maybe panic, maybe anger, crossed Dalton's face. He opened his mouth to object, but Whittaker held up a hand, silencing him with nothing more than a glance. The authority in the room had shifted, and everyone could feel it. Pam inhaled deeply. The shift in power was palpable. She straightened her spine, turning back to the audience, and began laying out her case with surgical precision. Every detail, every inconsistency, every abuse of power, it all came spilling out like an unstoppable tide. The web of corruption was intricate, but she exposed it thread by thread, leaving no room for doubt. Documents were projected onto the courtroom screen, evidence after evidence piling up until the picture became undeniable. As she spoke, she could see the shift happening in real time. The reporters leaned forward, their pens scratching furiously against their notepads. The spectators, once skeptical, now hung onto her every word. And Dalton's mask of arrogance was cracking. His fingers clenched against the armrests, his eyes darting toward the door as if searching for an escape that would never come. When she finally finished, the silence that followed was deafening. Even the air itself felt heavier, as if the very room was holding its breath, waiting for judgment to be passed. Whittaker turned his gaze to Dalton, his expression unreadable. "This court," he said, his voice slow, deliberate, "will not tolerate corruption. Judge Dalton, you are hereby removed from this case, effective immediately." A collective gasp rippled through the room. Dalton now looked smaller, his power stripped away in an instant. A few reporters exchanged glances before frantically typing on their laptops, capturing the moment history had been made. Pam let out a slow breath. Justice had prevailed. And now, the question remained. If you were in Pam's shoes, would you have fought back against corruption, even when the odds were stacked against you?